Hello everyone, welcome to today's Novedge webinar. V-Ray 3.64 Rhino, real fast power. Find out how V-Ray 3.64 Rhino can enhance the design process and boost productivity. V-Ray seamlessly integrates with Rhino and its cutting-edge features such as GPU rendering, hybrid rendering, and adaptive lights drastically cut your render times, you'll see. Additionally, V-Ray for Rhino and VRscans work together to create photorealistic imagery. As if that is not enough, the Grasshopper workflow has been improved. Today's webinar presenter, Anastasia Zhivaeva, has a master's degree in architecture from the University of Architecture, Civil Engineering and Geodesy in Sofia. Before joining Chaos Group, she has gained experience in architectural field and as a graphic designer. After joining Chaos Group, she has been actively working with V-Ray for 3ds Max, V-Ray for Maya, V-Ray for SketchUp, and V-Ray for Rhino. Before we get going, here's an overview of what we do in Novedge. Novedge is one of the largest online stores for design software. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's needs. And now we can do even more. We can help you with your own hardware configurations with high-speed customized computing. So if you need a workstation that is tailor-made to meet your individual needs, give us a call. And for more daily software news and limited time promotions, always remember to check out our Facebook account, Google+, Twitter, where we post our latest specials and new releases. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and is being recorded. So if you want to rewatch it, you can just go on YouTube and Vimeo and look for the Novedge channel. And now, without further ado, I'm going to share Anastasia's screen and make her the presenter so she can guide you through the new V-Ray 3.64 Rhino. Thank you, Anastasia. The stage is all yours. You have to unmute yourself.
Right. Hello, everyone.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia. I'm a CG specialist at Chaos Group. And before I begin, I would like to thank everyone for joining this webinar. I hope that you will find it useful. So I heard from the team of Novedge that a lot of people are interested in learning more about V-Ray 3.6 and actually use it for architectural visualization. So that's why for today I have prepared a few scenes, including an exterior and interior, and I'm going to focus on different parts of the typical V-Ray workflow. Also, I'm going to show you the latest features and improvements that we have that could really help you speed up your work and also create your designs with ease. So here's a quick overview of what we are going to cover today. First, in the interior scene, I'm going to explain what changes we have made to the user interface. After that, I'm going to show you how to work with light instances, a new feature that we have. I'm going to add a couple of VRscans materials to the scene, and I will, after that, show you how to create the so-called godrays effect using the new environment fog. After that, I'm going to move on to an exterior scene and show you how to add more details and depth to your render without spending a lot of time. And also, I'm going to show you the new animation recording method that we have implemented in the V-Ray 3.6. And of course, last but not least is the new and improved Grasshopper workflow that I will demonstrate. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch to our first scene. I have an interior here. And before we begin with the render itself, I want to point out here that we have a new compact toolbar, which has the different tools in categories. They are now easy to access with the drop-down menus. Also, those of you who are used to work with commands in Rhino, we have renamed the prefix for our commands. So now they start with V-Ray instead of vis. We have added also a new command called change default scene that lets you select an ArcVis preset. So what that will do is that it is going to enable the sun and the sky in your scene every time you start your project. So that's what I have selected right now. And if I go if I go to to V-Ray and check the environment tab, here I will have the sky enabled. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the interactive rendering just to see what we have here. You can notice that I am using the material override. I have it enabled right here because when working with light, I prefer to have my materials switched off so they do not distract me. Okay, and another thing that I want to mention here is that I have sky portals coming uh, placed on the right here, and they're letting more light in my scene. The sky portals are something I think familiar for a lot of people. They're just rectangular lights with sky portal setting enabled. Okay, I have my sun, I have the sky set, I have also the sky portals, and now I would like to work with the lights inside of the interior. And first I will begin with this bookshelf right here. And what I will do is I would like to add different lights to where I have decor, but I want them to have similar lighting, similar intensity, and similar color. So if I adjust one of them, I will have also to go manually adjust everything else because Rhino didn't have a concept for instancing lights. That's why we now have a tool called light instances, which let me just switch to the top view. I have selected the rectangular light and I'm going to place a couple of them. And what I'm going to do now is with holding the Alt key, I am just going to drag it. So that will create the instance of the first light. And you can also notice here that we have a couple of buttons that are new addition to V-Ray. If I click on select instances, all of the lights will be selected. After that, I'm going to position them in the right place. So right now they are at the bottom. I just need to move them around to rotate them. Okay, and I'm going to make another instance of this one. Okay, and if I click Edit in V-Ray Asset Editor, it will automatically open the light lister in the Asset Editor. Here you can see that I have V-Ray rectangular light, which is responsible for all of these instances. Let's rename them bookshelf. And switch back to render camera and start the interactive rendering and see what happens. There we go. I have my lights here. So if I click on the icon next to the name, they all be turned off and they are controlled from single object. Here, what I would like to do is to decrease the intensity and also make all of them invisible in the options. So I don't have to see the rectangular itself. There we go. Also here, you can notice that we have added ways to change the intensity and the color. So you no longer have to expand the menu right here and change them here in the main rollout. You can quickly do it here. Also, if I click on the color, you will notice that we have a new color picker. Now it allows me to see the previous color that I had and switch back to it very quickly, or select a new color and just click on it to save it in the palette and build the palette of custom colors that I can use later on in my scene. I will just get back to the first one, because here what I'm going to do is actually I'm not going to use a specific color. I want to have more control. If you have ever bought a light bulb before, you can notice that on the packaging there is a number in kelvins, which indicates the temperature of the bulb. And what that gives us is the information about how the light will appear. Is it going to be warm or neutral, or it will appear colder? And now we actually have a map, a procedural map that allows us to select specific temperature. Also here in the list, you can see that we rearranged the different procedural maps, so they are now easier to find. I will select the temperature one that I want to use, and I'm going to switch the mode again to temperature. Here in kelvins, I can change the number. For residential and commercial lighting, usually around 3,000 to 6,000 Ks is used. So let's go ahead, change that, and restart the interactive rendering. There you go. So lower numbers means that the light will appear more orange or red, and the other way around. If we get back to 6,000 and restart the interactive rendering, it will appear more neutral, more closer to blue. Okay, I like this color, so I'm going to leave it like that. And now let's stop the interactive rendering and disable the material override. So normally after I finish working with the light, what I will do is work on the materials in my scene. I have mine already applied because actually there were no major changes to the default materials that we have here. And also the library, there's just mainly user interface tweaks and adjustments. But now we actually do support vrscans. Let me just change the camera position because I would like to show the vrscans, and I'm going to switch the camera to a different aspect ratio. If you are not familiar with vrscans, this is those are materials that are created using the vrscan technology developed at our office. And what it does is that it takes 100 of images of any material sample that we have. From different angles, it gets information about the texture of the material. It gets information about how it behaves in different lighting setup. And there we go. I will just show you one of the materials. We have a library here with over 650 materials with different selected by categories. We have plastics, we have fabrics, and many, many more. So what I suggest is for you to try it for yourself. Just visit our web page, and let's start the interactive rendering and see what we have here. I will select, actually, let's wait for it a little bit to render. And what I will do here is I'm going to select a region for faster rendering. I will go to the materials editor, and here we can find the vrscan placeholder. So now what I can do is drag and drop a material that I have previously downloaded, or in my case, I'm just going to select, I'm going to use the one that I have downloaded before and load it directly from here. Okay, open. We need to wait for it a little bit to load. And now what I'm going to do is just select the object. I'm going to apply the vrscan material to to the door of the cabinet. There we go. You can see that the tiling right now is off. It looks too big, so I can very easily change that by just adjusting the tiling factor. Not only that, but I can also change the way it appears. So I can change the color to maybe something darker, maybe looking like that. Also, I can work with the finishing or the clear coat here. I can make it more reflective or increase the strength of the bump. I will leave it like that because the beauty of the scanned materials is shown when they're rendered high resolution. So I have prepared a few renders that I have done before that. Let me just load them. There you go. You can see this is the same material with some adjustments to the color. And here is another example of material that was before it was matte, and I adjusted the coating on the material, so now it's more reflective. All right, and while we are talking about materials here, what I want to mention also is, and that's something that I found very useful, is the new file path editor that could be found in V-Ray tab. So if I click it, I will get a list of all materials, geometry, or IES files if I have such in my scene. I will get this list with everything, and if something is missing, like for example this bitmap here, I can very quickly just relink. So I no longer have to go to the material itself, looking what is actually missing and changing the path. I can very easily do that directly from the file path editor. Okay, after finishing with the materials, what I would like to do next is to work on the finishing touches for the image. So let's go ahead and switch the camera. Again, I will adjust the aspect ratio. And I'm going to start the interactive rendering. Right now, this door will appear in different color. We will just ignore it for now. What I want to show you here is how you can create godrays. Probably you all have seen them before. It's this particular effect. It could appear in nature or in interior when we have, let's say, dust, for example. So how can I do that here? First, let me show you the result that I got when I was experimenting. Okay, we need to stop the render. There we go. You can see it right here coming from the windows on the right. And if I switch to the atmosphere render element that I have here, I can see the isolated effect. So I can get a better idea of how it looks, the color, everything. So let's go ahead and see how to achieve such effect. Again, I will start the interactive rendering and I will expand the settings menu. And here I'm going to enable the volumetric environment. It will be by default set to aerial perspective, but I will switch to environment fog. What's the difference between the aerial perspective and the environment fog is that with the second, we can actually create volumetric shadows and lights using all sources light sources that we have in our scene. So that includes the sun, also the artificial lights in the scene. While on the other hand, with aerial perspective, I could not achieve any volumetric shadows or light, so I cannot create God rays. But on the other hand, it's going to render faster. So usually when I work with exteriors, I prefer to use the aerial perspective. And when I'm looking for effects such as godrays, I'm switching to environment fog. Okay, so right now, obviously, it doesn't look like it should. It looks like we have a layer of dust. So what I will do here is, first of all, I'm going to change the height because right now it's too close to the ground. Everything turned black because the distance between the particles is very small right now. It's 1000. So they're too close to each other and they're blocking any light that I have in my scene. So let's go ahead and increase it more. Okay, it looks white right now. Let's wait for it a little bit. We can now notice that we have furniture that we can see, but still it doesn't look as it should. And the reason for that is that right now it's using all the light sources in my scene. So it's affected by all lights. Let's go ahead and stop this for now for it to be able to switch and choose select lights. I'm going to select only the sun and start the render again. All right, now I can see that we have some color right here. Let's wait for it a little bit and check the render element. Yeah, we have here this effect, but it's looking too, it's not looking bright enough. So what I will do here to increase the strength of the effect is I'm going to go to the light lister, select my sun, and I'm going to change the intensity. I'm sure that a lot of people have heard before that they should leave the sun parameters as they are. They shouldn't tweak it because in real life, obviously, we cannot do that. But we are 3D artists. We have this control. So I suggest for you to experiment. Don't be afraid to change those settings. So here I'm just going to say that I want it to be 1. And let's start the interactive rendering again. There we go. Now it looks much brighter. And if I switch to the atmosphere render, again, it looks brighter. So that was how I achieved this particular render. I just experimented a little bit with the color, with the strength of the sun, and that was the result. All right, so that's it for this particular scene. Let's go ahead and switch to the exterior. Just a second. We are going to wait for it to open. In the latest, in the past few years, it was becoming more and more common for architects and designers to render using their graphics card. So that's why we have been constantly adding and improving features that work on GPU. And what I want to show you here in this scene is a way to quickly add detail and depth to the image while rendering on GPU. But also have in mind that this approach is not only specific for GPU, but it also works for CPU workflow as well. So how I can switch to a GPU is in render settings, simply click on GPU. And next to it, I will have 3 dots available. If I enable them, I will see here that I can select C++. So what that means is that now in V-Ray 3.6, we can use hybrid rendering. What that means is that I'm rendering on GPU, but if I have a CPU that I want to help with the rendering process, I can enable it. I can utilize all hardware that I have. And here you can also see that I have 2 graphics cards. One of them will be working on my scenes. It will render, and the other one will actually take care of the viewport and everything else that I have. So it's not going to lag. But not this is not something that you need to have. It just helps when it's possible. All right, and let's again start interactive rendering and wait for it to load. Since it's a GPU, it's going to take a bit of time to load all the geometry, all textures that I have in my scene. But once they're loaded, it's going to render very quickly. There we go. So that's how it looks right now. I can immediately notice two things here. First, the water is too calm. It looks very smooth, and it's something that we are probably not going to see in real world. So let's focus on the water and how we can create waves there. Right now, with this release, we now have support for displacement on GPU. I will select my material that is applied to the water. And if I go to maps, I can enable now the displacement. I can use a black and white map, or what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the new noise B texture map. And I will just change the type to fractal, so the waves appear less appear smaller. Okay, and just let's change the amount to something more, to something bigger, and probably I'll need to restart it since we changed the amount of displacement. Okay, let's wait for it a bit. Adding displacement could actually take some time. There we go. And now it renders faster. If I zoom in, you can see that we now have nice looking waves. All right. And the next thing that I can see here and that I want to change is everything appears like it's very close to us. What I mean here is that usually what's further away than, let's say, in our case, the building is closer to us and everything in the background is further away. So in real life, it will appear less saturated than it is currently. So how I can do that is by, I will change it by going to settings. And again, I'm going to the volumetric environment tab. But this time, instead of the environment fog, I'm going to use the aerial perspective. Let's wait for it a little bit to render to see how it currently appears. Obviously, even at that stage, I can see that it's not looking right. It needs some adjustment. Everything appears very white. Okay, it's starting to clear out. Just like with the environment fog here, I have two main parameters. No, something happened, it stopped. Okay, I have two parameters here that are responsible for the way the aerial perspective appears. First of all, we have the height. Let's change it uh, to 1 because it's in meters. So the higher the number, the higher the effect will appear. All right, doesn't want to render for some reason. Okay, let's, yeah, things like that happen sometimes. So Let's try turning it off and render again. All right, doesn't want to start for some reason. Anyway, what I'm going to do, um, I'm going to start it again. Okay, we're not going to save the changes and just try to open it again. Usually if something happens, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just closing the scene and let it start again. Probably it broke Rhino. Okay, I will just use the other. I'll just use the other file. That's why we keep, when working, we keep two files. So if anything happens to the one, we can always get back to the second file. Okay. Again, I will switch the camera. No, actually, it's positioned already. And let's hit render. Oh, here, yeah, I have enabled the GPU. Okay, that's good. I think the other file is bugging. Oh, it started. It just needed more time. And this is from the first file. Okay. Now we are going to wait a little bit for it to load the scene. And there we go. Here I have already placed the displacement, and I have the real perspective enabled. So let's just see how to work with it, how to control it. I have here set it to 60, but I think it's too high. So let's place it lower. And the reason why I'm not seeing it very much right now is because it's very far away from the camera. So the visibility range controls how close to the camera the aerial perspective appears. So if I set this to a lower number, like 300, there we go. We have it here, but of course I need to adjust it a little bit, as I'm not really liking the result. There we go. And also here, what I want to do is to change the color to something more orange for a more subtle effect. All right, there we go. And here I'm going to enable the history, where I can save all the different versions of projects for a quick comparison. So let's compare two options. So that was before adding displacement and aerial perspective, and that's after adding it. Of course, you can experiment as much as you like, but don't forget to save your files just in case. Right, so at that point, I'm ready to render. And what I will do here is I will disable the interactive rendering, and instead I'm going to adjust the quality. I will set it to low, and I will enable denoiser. If you have used 3.4 before, you probably remember that first the denoiser needed to be added directly from render elements. But now we have a simple toggle that allows us to enable it right away. And we also have presets here. I'm going to set the strong one. I'm going to select the strong one, and I'm going to render this image. Let me hide the history as well. So what you can use denoiser for is when, for example, you need to provide an image and you don't really have enough time to render a high quality preview. You can select a quality that is set to low and use the denoiser to clean up the noise after it renders. But bear in mind that the denoiser is going to improve the image a couple of steps above of what you already have. So if you're looking for a very high quality result, um, I suggest for you to wait for the render to clean out. All right, it's almost finished, and it's going to denoise the image. The denoiser is creating different render elements that it uses later for denoising in order not to clean out to details. There we go. Almost done. And now I'm going to zoom in. So that is after the denoiser, and that is before. In case you think that the denoiser was too strong, you can now adjust the strength of this effect, something that was not possible before. So if we rendered the image with preset set to strong in 3.4, that was the result. We could not change it. What we can do is to render again. But now in 3.6, if I'm not liking the result at this moment, I can simply set it to mild and hit refresh, and it's going to update to something that is less strong. So now we have more details going on here. All right. And at this point, I would like to mention another improvement that we have made, and that could really help you with scenes where you have a lot of lights. So in house here at Chaos Group, we have developed an algorithm called adaptive lights that is going to take care of the many light sources in your scene. So what it will do is it will see which light sources are have the most important contribution to the scene, and it's going to sample there more. It's going to ray trace in that areas without sacrificing actually any quality to the image. And the difference for that particular scene, as you can see, without the adaptive lights, it took almost 18 minutes. And with adaptive lights on, it was less than 4 minutes. So what I suggest for you is to try it for yourself, see how it works with your scenes, and you no longer have to worry for many lights in your projects. All right, and now I'm going to switch to the second exterior scene that I have here. And what I want to talk about here is the new render recording animation recording method that we have implemented in 3.6. If you have used Rhino before for animating, for creating animations, you probably remember that um, you could not have any motion blur, you could not have any moving objects or textures in your scenes, um, which is something that the new recording method of V-Ray took care of, if I can say so. So what I need to do here is just select the one study for animation. Just click OK. And here I will get a V-Ray for Rhino a window asking me if I would like V-Ray to record the whole animation. So I will say yes. It's now going to start recording it for a couple of seconds. And what actually V-Ray does is that it analyzes the whole scene. It sees if we have any moving objects or we have any moving textures. If we have motion blur, it sees all the frame range, and it will analyze it and export it once. And after that, it's going to render it. So since I'm not really having enough time here to render a full animation, I'm just going to show you the results that we achieved with this particular scene. There we go. And you can notice that we also now have moving trees inside this animation. We can now import animated proxies uh, in Rhino. And we have also made some changes to the way proxies appear in the viewport. So that was what we got as a representation before, a polycloud a view of the object, which could create some issue when placing in the scene. I mean, when positioning the object, or if we have many proxies that could intersect, that could be seen later on. So what we have now is a way to control the way we export. So if I click on export, I have a couple of preview types here, and I'm going to switch. No, actually, I'm going to leave it at refine clustering, hit export. And we have now a different representation, which I can control. And if at some point later on while I'm working, I'm not happy with the way it looks, I can always go to the geometry tab and change the preview type again. We have a bounding box, we have a point preview. If I want to, I can even select a custom preview, which I do not have for this particular object, or even again see the whole mesh while keeping it as a proxy. All right. And what I want to do now is to actually show you I think the most exciting part for Rhino users. Now I'm going to stay here. I'm going to switch to a different scene. I'm talking about a V-Ray for Grasshopper. While the scene is loading, if you have used V-Ray in Grasshopper before, you probably know that in version 3.4, it was for the first time it was possible to render geometry that we have in Grasshopper. To render this geometry without having to bake it in Rhino. Let me just adjust the viewport. And it took us something around 15 components to start rendering, which was nice. It was working, but it took some time to set all the components. And in version 3.6, we actually now can start rendering with only 3 components. So first, you can notice that we have redesigned the toolbar as well. And my first component will be the geometry itself, right here. The next one I'm going to place is the V-Ray geometry. Here you can notice that some of the options have dots in front of the name. That's because here I can plug only V-Ray components. So right now I'm going to connect my geometry to a VGO component. And the third one that I'm going to place is the V-Ray renderer itself. Here we have in one place all the different settings. We can switch to GPU or CPU. We can select what type of mode we prefer, interactive or production. Actually, let me show you all controls. We can set the sampler or even set the quality for the renderer. So let's go ahead and plug it into the VGO slot. And I'm going to set render. There we go. My object is rendering without having to apply anything else. Materials, lights, they're no longer needed because by default we have a material applied and we have a light that you can see right now. And we also change uh, we changed the way we can apply materials. So the first one will be to place a simple material. Let's go ahead and connect it and maybe change the color so you can see the difference. I'm going to start the render. There we go. And we have control over reflections, glossiness, IOR, even opacity if needed. That would be the first way to add the material, but the more interesting ones are we can now select materials that we have created before. So any VR matte materials, if I connect it, right now it disappears because I need to select what type of material I want to use. And for that project, I selected one from our library. So I just selected copper blurry, and there we go. Very fast and easy to achieve. And the third one is actually adding a material directly from my project here. So if I open the asset editor and go to the materials tab, I can select, let's say, this one, aluminum blurry, and I'm going to use it for. If I click on the triangle, I will get a list of all the materials that I have in the Rhino scene. So let's select aluminum and let's connect it to the VGO component. There we go. That's it. That's the way I can very easily add and adjust the materials. And the next thing that I want to show you here is the new light rigs. We can use the default lighting, but if you would like to have more control, you can always switch to, let's say, the dome light rig. Let's connect it to the render element. It comes with an HDRI map that if I connect the slider to the rotation, I can adjust its position. I can make it invisible, or I can even use a texture that I have. So anything else, if I want to, I can select it directly from here. This is the dome light. I can also use the sun and sky system. There we go. With just one component, I have the V-Ray, sun and sky. Again, we have different options for control here. We have sun intensity. We can change the sun position and many more. So you have a lot of control over over your project. And the third one that I want to show you here is the simple light rig. Let's plug it at the same slot. And what it has here is everything in one place. So I have the global illumination, I have the environment color, and again, here, if I would like to add more customization to this particular lighting, I can always add another light, a rectangular one, or a sphere, like I would do in this case. I will use it. I will connect it to add lights. As you can see, it has a dot as well as the add lights. And what I need to do here is to actually position this particular sphere. Let's plug it. There we go. And if I use the slider for the radius, let's see what happens. Obviously, that's too much. Let's decrease it a little bit and make it invisible. There we go. All right. So for now, I'm going to disconnect the lights as I'm not really needing any specific light setup. But what I will do now is use an infinite plane, because right now it seems like my object is floating in space. And for that, I'm going to use the new V-Ray infinite plane. Let's connect it to the VGeo. Okay, and here I can adjust where it's positioned either manually. Let's try. Oh, that was too much, maybe 100. Okay, I can work with it and try to position it myself, but instead of trying, what I will do is simply put the VGeo node into the geometry slot. And what it will do, it will position it automatically. It will use the bounding box of the object, and I don't have to spend time adjusting it manually. Another thing that I want to show you here is that we can now actually have, we can use the shadows to cut them out. And instead of seeing the plane in the background, we can use any other image. So the way I will do that is by enabling the shadow catcher. There we go. You can see that we have some shadow here. And what I will do now is I'm going to place an image in the background. I have prepared one for today. Let's use this table, and there we go. Now I have my shadow, and I can place anything that I would like into the background. That works for not only for shadows but reflections, if we have any. I'm going to disable this for now, because right now what I want to do is to show you something else. If you noticed, when I move around in Rhino, I get the updates here. I can see them here. But what if I like what I'm seeing here and I want to tumble around the object without changing what I see in the frame buffer? Now, if I place the camera component, let's select the camera and plug it into the camera options. If I tumble around in Rhino, nothing will happen here. It's not going to change. And if at some point I decide that I would like to have this viewport rendered, I'm going to just select Get from Rhino Viewport, and it will update automatically. All right, well, there is just one more thing left here to show. I'm rendering here in isolated environment, but what if I have something placed in Rhino and I would like to see them both without baking the geometry? What I will do is I'm going to place a render in project component. I will connect them, and now I can get to Rhino and start rendering directly from here. Oh, it turned white because I need to turn on the room that I have. There we go. And I'm going to change the camera. And now if I render, it's no longer going to be white, but I'm going to see my room. Okay, let's wait for it a little bit to clean out. There we go. That's how you can very fast combine the Rhino project and the Grasshopper geometry and still have control over the object itself. Okay, so that was all from me. Before we get to the questions, I would like to encourage you to test the new V-Ray 3.6 for yourself, if you haven't already. Try the new tools and see how they fit in your workflow. Take advantage of the new adaptive lights algorithm, which is personally one of my favorite in this release. It's one of the highlights for me, together with the light instances that can allow you to quickly control similar lights as one object. Also, the file path editor that will allow you to seamlessly manage all the assets in your project. And of course, V-Ray in Grasshopper has never been easier. All right, so thank you very much for joining. I hope that you learned something new today. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Yes, thank you, Anastasia. That was wonderful. Great problem solving, by the way, and great tips for when, something goes
Yeah,
wrong and Rhino dies. No, that's
yeah,
fantastic. So
no
I'm
one
gonna
escaped from that.
so I'm gonna start. So there's a few questions that are the same, that are inquiries about when will be the V-Ray available for Rhino 6. Do you have any
Mhm.
info on that?
Well, it is still in development stage. We will share more information about the release once we are sure that the builds are completely stable. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be soon.
Okay, well, looking forward to it.
Mhm.
Um, so we have great feedback for 3.6, that everybody loves it. And Benjamin says, I previously loved using the V-Ray Express toolbar for Rhino. So are there any plans to update these toolbar?
Um, what do you mean to update it? Everything is still there.
Okay.
If you would like, you can use it. You just go to Show Toolbar, and there we go. You can select everything that you need.
Okay, I hope that was what
It's not
Benjamin was
removed.
asking. Yes.
Mhm.
Can you select objects to be included or excluded on each light?
Mm, are you talking about the light instances?
Martin, are you talking about
Um,
that? Uh,
if if it's about the light instances, I can. Yeah, you can create, after you created the light instances, you can select only one of them and make it unique. There is again a button for that. Let me just go here. There we go. You can click on it and it will make only the selected light unique, and you can control it separately from the light lister here, as it's currently that one.
Actually, Martin was referring to selecting which object can be illuminated for each light, which apparently is an option on 3ds Max, V-Ray for 3ds Max. So is it
Uh,
possible for,
can you repeat the
yes,
question again? I'm not sure
yes,
I understand.
yeah. Martin is asking if it's possible to select which object can be illuminated for each light.
Mm-hmm. No. As long as I know in Rhino, that's not possible.
Okay, okay, Fair enough. And is it possible to add render elements and add specific lights to them?
Like in 3ds Max, light select. If it's that, then no, right in Rhino, it's not possible.
Okay. And we had a question on animation. How do you add an animation movement to proxies?
To proxies, you have to animate them in either Maya or 3ds Max. We use 3ds Max for the trees in the video. So
Okay.
you animate them there and you export them.
Okay.
Mhm.
And this is one question from Nenad. I think is asking if you own V-Ray for SketchUp. I think that's what he's asking. Do you need
Mhm.
a new V-Ray for Rhino? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay. It
Mhm.
goes without saying. Okay, but we had to say it. Okay.
Mhm.
And the very first question, I'm going backwards, was Danny asking, what were the blue and yellow boxes outlines in the first scene? The very first
Um,
scene that you opened the interior.
let's open again that scene. Um, I'm not sure I remember
I don't either, but okay,
the
yes, there's a yellow and blue box and orange. These
uh,
outlines,
is it in the
right?
interface?
It's No, it's right on the image. You see these outlines are orange, blue,
Here?
and yellow. That's it.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Um, well, that would appear if in render output in settings, here I have save frame turned on. So if I disable it, they will disappear. What I use that for is, let's say that we would like to have a aspect ratio for a portrait. So it's going to be uh, a rectangular. Um, a vertical rectangular, but I'm not really seeing right now what will go into that frame. That's why I'm going to enable the save frame, and it will show me what the camera sees. So everything grayed out is something that I'm not going to see in the render.
Okay.
Not sure if I explain it clear enough.
Yeah, I think
So
so, but
yeah,
let us
it's
know.
just showing what the camera will see when it's rendering.
Looks like it. Looks like you answer perfectly. And Danny's saying you explain it well.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
great.
And actually, Tord is asking, will you add light select later?
Um, I cannot really say. I don't have such information. It really depends on the developers.
Okay.
But feedbacks like that is important for us. We uh, we are listening, and if it's possible, maybe at some point it will be.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for the feedback, Tord. And everybody who has idea and always raise their hands and talks with Chaos Group and um, giving them feedback and new idea. That's great. Well,
Mhm.
these were all the questions, Anastasia. That was wonderful. That was a great, great demo. Hands-on architecture visualization. We love that. I'm afraid to have to take the screen back to say my
Mhm.
goodbyes and
Okay.
to remind all of you to check out novedge.com to find all your vRhino plugins. And we also sell Rhino. So, and if you're not sure about Rhino 6 yet, just, I recommend everybody to get the upgrade now while to Rhino 6 while there's a discount and then maybe install it later when V-Ray for Rhino 6 will work. So just a thought. And I also want to remind you that today's webinar has been recorded, and I will post it on YouTube and Vimeo's Novedge channel. So you can just easily go novedgetv.com, and it will take you to all of our webinars and all the great playlists we have of demo on YouTube. So thanks again for joining us today. Thank you, Anastasia. Have a wonderful rest of the night. And everybody else, see you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.